Trash like you doesn't touch $1 million cars. The words ripped through the luxury showroom, like a blade dragged across glass. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne flutes froze in the hands of wealthy buyers. The insult didn't just echo, it scorched, painting the room with naked disdain that everyone heard, but no one challenged. Two security guards shifted forward, boots heavy against polished marble, as if those 7 words were law, and they were its enforcers. And the man they were closing in on? He stood in quiet stillness, hands loose at his sides, eyes calm, not because he accepted the insult, but because he already knew how this would end. In 12 minutes, this same showroom wouldn't just regret those words. It would have a new owner, a new boss, and his name would be on the deed they never imagined he could afford. Before we go further, tell me this. Have you ever been dismissed before you even got the chance to speak? If you believe no one should be treated like this, hit that like button, drop your city or country in the comments, and let's keep stories like this alive. Now, back to how this storm started. End quote. 12 minutes earlier, the glass doors had slid open with a soft hiss, letting in a man dressed simply. A plain black polo, dark jeans, clean sneakers. No gold watch. No designer logo shouting status. Just quiet confidence in the way he walked, like he belonged anywhere, even in rooms that wanted him gone. The first words he heard weren't, "Welcome in" or, "Can I help you?" They were a cold slap of judgment from a salesman at the door. "Sir, this showroom isn't for your kind," the man said, his voice sharp enough to cut the soft jazz humming from hidden speakers. The visitor met his eyes, calm, unwavering. "I'd like to see the new Valkyrie GT, he said evenly. His tone carried no anger, only fact, as though money and taste needed no announcement. But prejudice moved faster than service. The salesman smirked, laughter spilling out like cheap wine on velvet. "That car starts at 7 figures. Let's not waste time today, yeah?" Heads turned. A young trainee, tablet in hand, glanced nervously between the visitor and the VIP list. Something about this felt wrong, but fear chained her voice down. Moments later, the manager swaggered over, his suit screaming, borrowed power. He gave the visitor a once-over, slow and scornful, before delivering the line that turned a quiet insult into a public execution. "Trash like you doesn't touch $1 million cars." Gasps rippled through the showroom. Some guests frowned, others looked away. Nobody stepped in. The air turned heavy, thick with unspoken approval and quiet discomfort. Security moved closer, hands hovering near his arms, ready to drag him out like unwanted noise. The hum of fluorescent lights and showroom jazz now felt like mockery, a soundtrack to arrogance on display. He allowed himself to be pushed one step back. Not out of weakness, not out of shame. Out of patience. Because storms burn themselves out. But mountains? They stay, immovable, inevitable, and 12 minutes from now, every man who called him trash would be packing up his desk. Every smirk would vanish. And this dealership would have a new boss, a boss they'd never dare to underestimate again. The air inside the showroom stayed heavy, as if the insult had stained the marble floor. The man in the black polo didn't move. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't fought back, but the storm kept brewing. The manager smirked, emboldened by silence he mistook for weakness. "Security, make sure he understands we're serious," he ordered, voice dripping with authority borrowed from a name tag. One guard stepped forward, hand brushing the man's elbow like he was trash to be taken out with last night's receipts. The man didn't resist, didn't even flinch. His eyes stayed calm, locked on the Valkyrie GT gleaming under spotlights in the center of the room, a car he could have bought 10 times over without blinking. "Sir, please leave before this gets unpleasant," the other guard muttered, as if the unpleasantness hadn't already started 5 minutes ago. Near the reception desk, a young trainee clutched her tablet tighter. She glanced at the guest list again. Her gut screamed this man wasn't just another walk-in. She'd seen his name before, read it in an internal memo about a potential investor. But fear glued her tongue to the roof of her mouth. Customers nearby whispered. A couple paused by a luxury SUV, watching like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. One of them murmured, "This feels wrong," but didn't step forward. The manager leaned in close, voice low but sharp enough to slice. "You're scaring off real buyers. Go try your luck at a used lot down the street." The guards tightened their grip on his arms, ready to escort him out like he was a stain on the carpet. Inside his chest, a flicker of memory lit. 20 years ago, another showroom, another set of eyes cutting him down before he could speak. Back then, he walked away. Back then, he swore he'd build something they couldn't erase. Today, standing here, history repeated itself, but this time, the ending wouldn't. One guard tugged harder, pulling him toward the glass doors. A phone camera clicked to life. A man in his early 32nd, another customer, slowly raised his phone. "This doesn't feel legal," he whispered to his friend. The friend shook his head. "Doesn't matter. They think he doesn't belong." The man in black let himself be led halfway to the door, then stopped. He turned his head, meeting the manager's smug gaze. Calm, steady, deliberate. "You're making the biggest mistake of your career." The manager snorted. "Yeah? And what's that?" "Thinking you don't belong here." A quiet tension gripped the room. Even the trainee's hands froze above the tablet. The manager's arrogance filled the silence, too loud, too sure of itself. The man reached into his pocket, not fast, not threatening, and pulled out a slim phone. Pressed one button, spoke 3 words. "Activate the protocol." On the other end, a calm, efficient female voice replied. "Understood. Acquisition notice sent to corporate. ETA, 10 minutes. The manager blinked, thrown off for the first time. "What? What did you just do?" The man didn't answer. He simply looked back at the Valkyrie GT one last time before the guards pushed him outside. Through the glass, every guest could see his posture, not defeated, not begging. Just waiting, like a tide about to turn. 12 minutes. That's all it would take for the keys to change hands, for every sneer to evaporate, and for a new name to be carved into this showroom's front door, a name no one here would ever dare dismiss again. The glass doors slid shut behind him with a hiss that sounded too much like victory for the wrong side. Inside, the manager clapped his hands once, dusting them off like he'd just removed a problem, not a person. "Finally, back to real clients," he said, voice oily, smug. The guards chuckled quietly, returning to their post, but the room wasn't the same. A current of discomfort hummed under the showroom lights. Guests exchanged glances, whispers rising like static in the background. Near the SUV display, the young man with the phone spoke louder this time. "You guys really just dragged someone out for looking different?" His friend added. He didn't even raise his voice. The trainee at the desk bit her lip, knuckles white on the tablet. Finally, she found her voice. "Sir." "I think that was..." She hesitated, glancing toward the manager, then back down. "I think that was an important client." The manager scoffed. "Important? Please. If he had real money, he wouldn't show up dressed like that." "Learn to spot pretenders." The words hit heavier than he expected. A middle-aged woman standing near the coupe turned, frowned sharp as a blade. "Pretenders?" "You judged him before he said 10 words. The manager straightened his tie, trying to laugh it off. "Ma'am, we have to protect our brand image. Not everyone belongs in a luxury showroom." But the word sounded wrong even to his own staff. The trainee finally snapped. "Belongs?" He gave his name. "I saw it on the list this morning." He was flagged as a priority visitor. The laughter drained from the guards' faces. Guests murmured louder now, phones slowly rising into recording positions. Then, 12 minutes after the glass had shut him out, it opened again. He walked back in. Same plain polo. Same calm eyes. But this time, his presence carried a weight that bent the air. Conversations died. Phones stayed up. Even the guards froze halfway to intercept him, something in his stride, making them hesitate. The manager forced a chuckle, voice cracking just slightly. "Sir, if you're here to cause trouble..." The man didn't break stride. He stopped only when he stood a foot away, looking the manager dead in the eye. His voice was low, each word landing like a verdict. "I don't cause trouble. I end it." He glanced around the showroom, letting every witness see his face, hear his words. Then, pulling his phone from his pocket, he spoke just loud enough for all to hear. "Send the final confirmation. I'll take possession immediately." The trainee's breath caught. Guests whispered. "Possession? What's he saying?" A ripple of unease ran through the room. The guards exchanged looks, unsure whether to step in or step back. The man's gaze never left the manager. 12 minutes ago, you called me trash," he said, voice calm but heavy, "and threw me out of a building I now own. Tell me, where do you think you belong?" Silence slammed down like a gavel. The smirk drained from the manager's face. Phones caught every second. And for the first time, the power in this room shifted, not with shouting, not with threats, but with truth standing tall in black jeans and quiet fury. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the showroom lights. The insults still clung to the air, sour and undeniable. Every phone in the room was up now. Tiny red lights blinking like witnesses unwilling to look away this time. The manager swallowed hard, but tried to gather what little bravado he had left. "This is ridiculous. You're bluffing. People like you don't just walk in and..." He stopped when the glass doors opened again. This time, it wasn't a lone man stepping through. A woman in a sharp navy suit and heels walked in with purpose, a leather briefcase in hand, flanked by another figure in a gray suit carrying a folder thick enough to crush lies on sight. "Sir, we've finalized the transfer," the woman said crisply, approaching the man in black with deference that made the entire staff freeze. She handed over a sleek tablet, her voice steady but sharp enough for every phone camera to catch. As of 4:27 p.m., the corporate office confirmed the expedited acquisition of this dealership. "All operational authority now rests with you, Mr. Carter." Gasps broke through the tense quiet. The trainee's hands flew to her mouth. The young man filming whispered, "No way, he owns it?" The murmurs rolled across the floor like an oncoming storm. Mr. Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply turned the screen toward the manager. "Do you read English?" he asked, tone calm, unshaken. "Because this says every inch of this building, every car you thought I couldn't touch, belongs to me now." The manager's face drained of color. He glanced toward the guards for support, but they didn't move. Their hands were suddenly very still at their sides, like men realizing they'd picked the wrong side of history. The lawyer in gray stepped forward next, voice clear, authoritative. "Effective immediately, all employees involved in discriminatory conduct today are suspended pending termination review. Security footage, guest recordings, and eyewitness statements are already being uploaded to corporate servers." Every phone in the room tilted slightly higher. The audience now fully awake, fully aware they were watching justice unfold in real time. The young trainee finally spoke, voice shaking but firm. "I saw him on the VIP list this morning. I should have said something sooner." Mr. Carter turned to her, his expression softening just enough to cut through the tension. "You spoke now. That matters." Then he faced the manager, who stood rooted to the spot, jaw slack, arrogance shattered. 12 minutes ago, you had me dragged out like I was nothing," Mr. Carter said, voice dropping to a quiet force that filled the space more than shouting ever could. "Now, I own every key, every car, every contract under this roof. Tell me, what's your policy for dealing with trash when it's standing in your shoes?" The manager couldn't answer. Not with words. Not with anything. And the room knew the reckoning had only just begun. The manager stood frozen, lips parted, face as pale as the marble floor beneath his polished shoes. The weight of the truth pressed down on him, heavier than any title he thought he owned. Every camera in the room waited, every witness holding their breath for what came next. Mr. Carter didn't rush. He let the silence stretch, let it carve the moment into stone. Then, he handed the tablet back to his assistant and took one step closer to the man who had thrown him out. 12 minutes ago, you made 3 choices, he began, his voice quiet but carrying like a verdict. You judged me by my clothes. You called me trash. And you had me dragged out of a place I had every right to be in. The manager opened his mouth, but Mr. Carter's hand rose slightly, not to stop him physically, but to silence lies before they could crawl out. This showroom deserves leadership that knows the difference between protecting a brand and destroying it. Effective immediately. He turned to the lawyer, his next words ringing like a gavel strike. Terminate his employment. Permanently revoke access to corporate systems. Escort him out, not as security did to me, but as someone who no longer belongs in this business. The lawyer nodded once, already typing notes into the folder system. The assistant added, voice firm, documented, termination effective 4:29 p.m., access revoked. A collective murmur surged through the guests. Someone whispered, finally. Another said, justice. Phones stayed up, recording every second, turning humiliation into consequence in real time. The manager's arrogance cracked. Please, Mr. Carter. I didn't know who you were. Mr. Carter's gaze sharpened, steel under calm. And if I wasn't who I am, would you have treated me any better? Power isn't your excuse. It's your mirror. The words hit harder than a shout. Even the guards looked down at their shoes, shame creeping up their spines. Mr. Carter scanned the room next, eyes settling on the salesman who had first spat the insult. You, he said, tone cutting through the air. Consider this your last day here. A showroom that judges people before it serves them has no place in my company. The salesman stammered. Sir, Save it, Mr. Carter interrupted, voice final. Pack your things, leave with him. A hush fell, then swelled into applause, not wild, but strong, deliberate. A release of tension that had been choking the air for far too long. Customers clapped. The trainee blinked back tears, shoulders shaking with relief. Even the young man with the phone filming muttered. About time someone stood up. Mr. Carter let the sound wash over the room, not as celebration but as proof that this moment mattered. He turned once more to the crowd, his voice low but steady, a mic drop carried on truth alone. Respect isn't a luxury item. It's the minimum price of entry. And under my leadership, that price is non-negotiable. Silence followed, thick with a new understanding. The showroom's old rules had just been replaced, permanently. The echo of applause still lingered, like thunder refusing to die down. The manager and salesman stood stiff, stripped of their titles, their power evaporating under every blinking phone camera. But the reckoning wasn't over, not yet. From the far corner of the showroom, a voice broke the uneasy quiet. This isn't the first time. Heads turned. A woman in her late 20s, dressed casually in jeans and a blazer, stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice carried the weight of someone who had waited too long to speak. 2 months ago, I came here to test drive a car I'd saved for over 5 years to afford. They refused to even let me touch the keys. Said my financing wouldn't clear before they even ran my name. Gasps rolled through the crowd. The manager's face flushed red, but he stayed silent, eyes darting toward the door like an exit could erase the truth. Another voice joined in. A middle-aged man with a baseball cap pulled low. Yeah. Same thing happened to my son last summer. He walked in excited to buy his first car. They told him the lot was closed to casual visitors. Funny thing is, 3 other customers walked in after him and got full tours. The room buzzed louder, the ugly pattern taking shape in real time. More phones rose, capturing not just a firing, but a revelation, a system exposed. Mr. Carter stood still, letting the voices build, each story stacking like evidence in a trial that had waited years to happen. When the murmurs started to fade, he spoke, his tone calm but commanding. How many of you were told you didn't belong here? Hands rose hesitantly at first, then more. At least a dozen guests and former customers standing near the entrance, near the cars, near the glass doors that had just thrown him out. The trainee finally stepped forward, shaking but determined. I logged 3 complaints in the last month alone, she said, eyes flicking to Mr. Carter, then the crowd. All from customers of color, all dismissed by management. They told me not to escalate, or I'd lose my job. The lawyer beside Mr. Carter was already typing furiously. Every word recorded, every testimony preserved. Mr. Carter's gaze swept the room, his voice steady, deliberate, carrying the finality of a gavel strike. This isn't about a single insult. This is about a culture that decided status came before service, and prejudice came before professionalism. That culture ends today. He turned to the assistant. Effective immediately, every past complaint buried under this roof is to be reopened, reviewed by corporate, and compensated if necessary. No exceptions. A ripple of approval surged through the guests. The young man with the phone filming whispered, This is bigger than I thought." A woman near the entrance murmured, "Finally, someone with power is listening," and for the first time since the storm began, the air in the showroom shifted, not heavy with judgment, but alive with a new promise. The days of silent injustice here were over. The energy in the showroom shifted like a tide, pulling everything with it. What started as a private humiliation had turned into a public reckoning, and the crowd was no longer silent. Guests were speaking up, stories piling higher, injustice laid bare for everyone to see. Mr. Carter stood tall in the center of it all, calm, collected, letting the weight of truth settle before he moved. The manager and salesman clung to what little composure they had left, faces pale, hands twitching like men waiting for a verdict they already knew was coming. Then, unexpectedly, one of the security guards stepped forward. He was the taller of the two, the one who had grabbed Mr. Carter's arm earlier. His posture was tense, but his voice carried something new: hesitation, remorse. "Sir, I owe you an apology," he said, glancing briefly at the cameras, then back at Mr. Carter. "I just followed orders. But what happened out there wasn't right. I knew it then, and I know it now." A murmur rippled through the showroom. The second guard shifted uncomfortably before adding, "We were told to remove you fast. No questions asked. We've seen it before. More times than I can count. But watching this unfold, we stood on the wrong side today." The crowd buzzed louder. Customers looked at each other, some nodding, others filming closer. The balance of power tilted further. Mr. Carter's expression didn't soften, but his voice remained steady. "Integrity isn't about standing up when it's easy," he said, eyes locked on the guards. "It's about doing it when it costs you. But the fact that you're speaking now, that matters." The trainee from earlier stepped forward too, her face flushed but determined. "Sir, I'll testify to everything. I saw how they treated you. I saw the name on the VIP list. I know this wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate." Mr. Carter nodded once. "Then you'll have a future here. This company needs people who tell the truth, not hide behind lies." The guests erupted in claps, not scattered this time, but unified, strong, a wave of support that filled every corner of the showroom. Phones recorded it all, a once hostile space turning into a platform for justice. The lawyer raised his voice, addressing the room. "Effective immediately, a full investigation will be launched into prior incidents of discrimination at this dealership. If you were wronged, if you were denied service, you will be heard, compensated, and respected going forward, under new leadership." A woman near the door called out, "About time," another added, "Finally, someone in charge who gets it." The applause swelled again, louder now, like a verdict delivered by the people themselves. The former manager tried to edge toward the exit, but every eye in the room followed him. His power was gone. His reign of quiet cruelty ended under the bright showroom lights, and at the center of it all, Mr. Carter stood unshaken, not needing to raise his voice or flash his wealth. Power had finally shifted, not to money, not to titles, but to dignity backed by authority that could not be denied anymore. The applause died down into a tense hush, like the room itself was waiting for the final blow. Every phone stayed up, every eye locked on Mr. Carter as he stood in the center of the showroom, a man who had been dragged out as trash 12 minutes ago, and now commanded the space like a courtroom judge. His assistant stepped closer, holding out a second tablet, voice clear and sharp. "Corporate has approved immediate termination of management-level staff involved in today's incident. Access badges will be deactivated. Company systems locked. Pending final documentation, the lawyer followed, opening a folder thick with printed reports. These complaints never saw the light of day, he said, scanning the papers. Buried under false summaries signed off by management. He looked directly at the former manager. Your name is on every one of them, the manager stammered. I just followed brand guidelines. Mr. Carter's gaze cut through the excuse like steel. Your brand guideline was discrimination, and that guideline is over. He turned to his assistant. Seal all complaint files under my authority. Effective immediately, every unresolved case gets reopened and escalated to headquarters. Already in motion, she replied, fingers flying over the screen. Past victims will be contacted within 48 hours. Compensation packages pending approval. Guests looked at one another, disbelief mixing with something new, relief, hope. The young man still filming muttered, this is bigger than just firing someone. He's rewriting the rules right here. Security personnel stepped forward again, but not to grab Mr. Carter this time. One of them held out the former manager's keycard. Sir, his access is revoked. We've confirmed the system locked him out. The lawyer nodded, voice echoing like a verdict. Gregory Mason, you are officially terminated from this dealership and barred from employment under Mr. Carter's ownership across all branches. You are required to leave these premises immediately. Legal will be in touch regarding further action. The manager's face drained of all color. A shaky protest escaped his lips. This is public humiliation. You can't. Mr. Carter didn't raise his voice, but his words carried a finality that left no room for argument. Public humiliation? That's what you tried to make me live through. The difference is, this isn't humiliation, it's accountability. The crowd erupted in applause again. Louder this time, a wave of vindication filling the air. Guests nodded, some clapping, others saying finally, and about time they paid for this. The lawyer handed sealed envelopes to both the manager and the salesman, their names printed in bold red letters. Terminated. The gesture was deliberate, undeniable, filmed from every angle. Mr. Carter turned to the guests, voice steady and calm, the weight of his words cutting through the noise. This showroom has a new rule starting today. Everyone gets treated with respect. No exceptions, no excuses. Anyone who cannot live by that rule has no place under my roof. And just like that, the tide had fully turned. The man who had been dragged out the door now stood as the unquestioned authority, and for the first time in that room's history, justice wasn't whispered, it was written into policy, permanent and public. The scene in the showroom had shifted completely. The same marble floor that had witnessed a man dragged out 12 minutes earlier was now a stage for justice. But the story wasn't staying inside these four glass walls anymore, it was spilling out into the world. Every corner of the room glowed with the tiny red dots of recording phones. Guests whispered updates to friends on live calls. Comments flooded live streams faster than anyone could read them. This is going viral. Justice in real time. Power turned on its head. A young man near the entrance checked his screen and announced, "We're past 50,000 views already, and climbing." Gasps rippled through the room. This wasn't just an audience anymore. It was a global witness list. The former manager stood clutching the termination envelope, his face drained of color. Pride had been stripped from him, replaced by fear. He took a step toward Mr. Carter, voice trembling. "Sir, please. I made a mistake. I didn't know who you were. Give me another chance." Mr. Carter's eyes were sharp, his tone calm but unyielding. "You keep saying you didn't know who I was. That's exactly the problem. Respect should never depend on status. It should be given to every human being who walks through that door. You failed that test, over and over again." The salesman, equally pale, tried his luck. "Sir, I was just following instructions. I didn't mean anything by it." Mr. Carter didn't flinch. "You meant every word when you called me trash. You weren't following instructions, you were following prejudice. And prejudice has no place in my company." The assistant stepped forward, phone in hand. "Mr. Carter, Media outlets are already picking up the live streams. Multiple reporters are requesting statements. Hashtags tied to this incident are trending in real time. The lawyer added, corporate headquarters has been alerted. They're preparing an internal investigation into similar complaints across other branches. This is only the beginning of a wider audit, guests murmured, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads in disbelief that such bias had been allowed to fester for so long. The trainee spoke up again, voice steadier now. This isn't an isolated mistake. I've seen this pattern for months. Today's just the first time someone with real power fought back. Mr. Carter looked around the room, letting his gaze land on every customer, every employee, every camera. His words were measured, firm. Power isn't just owning buildings or businesses, it's holding people accountable when they think no one's watching. But today, the whole world is watching. The crowd erupted in applause once more. Outside the showroom's tall windows, people had gathered, drawn by the commotion, phones raised high to capture history being made. And for the first time, the same glass doors that had once been used to throw him out now framed a different picture. A black CEO reclaiming his dignity, rewriting the rules, and turning one act of prejudice into a public, undeniable promise of change that no one could ever ignore again. The noise outside the glass doors swelled, a low roar of onlookers and reporters drawn by the unfolding story. Inside, the tension had transformed into something else entirely. The fear and arrogance that had once ruled this room had been replaced by a different kind of authority, quiet, absolute, and unmistakably just. Mr. Carter stood in the center of the showroom, his assistant and lawyer flanking him like sentinels of change. He scanned the faces around him, customers, staff, witnesses, each holding their phone like a torch in a long darkened room. Effective immediately, Mr. Carter began, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the space. This dealership operates under new leadership mine. And the first order of business is fixing what was broken the moment you walked in today. He turned to his assistant. Prepare refunds and goodwill credits for every guest wronged by this location in the past year. If they were denied service, insulted, or lied to, they'll leave here today knowing someone finally made it right. Yes, sir, she replied, already firing off instructions to the finance office. Then to the lawyer. Post a notice. Zero tolerance for discrimination. Effective now. Anyone who ignores it won't just lose their job, they'll lose their place in this industry. The lawyer's nod was crisp. Done. Signage and internal memos will be posted today. Customers who had shared their past experiences stepped closer, uncertainty giving way to cautious hope. A woman who had spoken up earlier whispered, "You're really doing this, right now?" Mr. Carter met her eyes, unwavering. Justice delayed is justice denied. We start today. He motioned to the trainee who had dared to speak truth earlier. What's your name? Hannah, she said, voice soft but proud. Hannah, he said, from this moment, you're promoted to client relations lead. This place needs more people willing to do what's right, even when it's not easy. Tears welled in her eyes, as murmurs of approval spread through the crowd. Someone clapped. Then another. Soon the whole room was applauding again. But this time it wasn't a release of tension, it was a celebration of a new beginning. The former manager, still clutching his termination envelope, tried one last desperate plea. Sir, I can learn. Please, don't end my career like this. Mr. Carter didn't raise his voice, but his words landed like a gavel strike. You ended your career, the moment you decided judgment was easier than respect. This building doesn't need second chances for bigotry. It needs first chances for dignity. Reporters outside the glass pressed closer, flashes popping, the story spreading faster than the insults ever had. And there, under the bright lights meant to sell luxury, a different kind of sale closed, arrogance traded for accountability, pain traded for justice, and a new standard written into the very fabric of this dealership, visible, undeniable, and permanent. The hum of conversation quieted, as Mr. Carter's lawyer laid a thick, leather-bound folder on the gleaming hood of the Valkyrie GT, the very car he'd been told he could never touch. Under the showroom lights, The gold-embossed corporate seal shimmered like a verdict handed down from the highest court of business. "This is the official transfer of ownership," the lawyer announced, voice ringing out for every guest, every phone camera to hear. "Effective immediately, this dealership and all its assets are under Mr. Carter's control." Mr. Carter stepped forward, calm but commanding, his presence drawing every gaze in the room. The manager, now stripped of authority and status, shrank against the wall, his earlier arrogance dissolved into pale regret. The assistant held out a sleek, silver pen. "Sir, corporate has sent over final signatures for you and the outgoing management. This concludes the acquisition and seals all changes under your authority." Mr. Carter didn't rush. He glanced around the room at Hannah, the trainee who had spoken up, at the customers who had been silent victims before today, at the two guards who had finally chosen integrity over orders. His voice carried a steady weight. "This paper isn't just a contract. It's a promise that what happened here never happens again." He leaned over the document, signed his name in firm, deliberate strokes, then handed the pen to the lawyer, who flipped the folder toward the former manager. "Per protocol, you sign here, to acknowledge termination and transfer of operational control." The manager's hands trembled as he scrawled his name, the final act of a reign built on quiet cruelty, ending in front of a room full of witnesses. Cameras clicked. A hush swept through the space, heavy with consequence. Mr. Carter closed the folder himself, sealing it with a snap that sounded louder than applause. He looked around, making sure no word went unheard. This dealership was meant to sell dreams, but chose to sell dignity instead, he said, his tone firm but steady. "Today, we rewrite that story. From this moment forward, no one gets turned away because of the way they look, the way they dress, or the name they carry." Applause broke out again, louder this time, filling the showroom with a new kind of energy. Guests raised their phones higher, capturing not just a transaction, but transformation. Someone near the entrance murmured, "This isn't just about cars anymore. It's about change." The lawyer handed Mr. Carter a new set of keys, not to a single car, but to the entire building. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone watching. He held them up briefly, then placed them into Hannah's hand. "These keys represent trust," he said softly. "And trust only stays when you earn it, every single day." The crowd erupted once more, a wave of approval sweeping through the glass-walled room. Outside, reporters scrambled to broadcast the image of a black CEO who had walked in disrespected and walked out owning not just a dealership, but the narrative itself. By the time the sun dipped low outside the towering glass windows, the energy inside the showroom had transformed. What once reeked of arrogance now felt like the start of something clean, unshakable. Guests who had stood frozen in disbelief an hour ago now smiled, whispered, clapped softly, not for luxury cars, but for justice unfolding where prejudice had once ruled. Mr. Carter stood near the center, beside the Valkyrie GT, his name freshly inked on the ownership contract that now lay secure in his lawyer's hands. Hannah, still clutching the keys he'd given her, looked at him like the world had just shifted beneath her feet. "Today isn't about me," Mr. Carter said, voice low but carrying, silencing the room without force. "It's about everyone who has ever been told they don't belong, everyone who's been looked down on before being looked in the eye. This place will never make that mistake again, not while my name is on the door." Reporters outside were pressing microphones against the glass now, their flashes popping like sparks in a forge. The assistant leaned in quietly. "Sir, the footage is everywhere. National networks are calling this a landmark moment for corporate accountability." Mr. Carter nodded once, his gaze sweeping over the room. The guests who had shared their own stories earlier were now standing taller, lighter somehow, like the weight of silence had been lifted. The guards who had once forced him out now stood by the entrance, not as enforcers but as protectors, ready to keep bias, not people out. He turned to the remaining staff, voice firm. "From this day forward, there are no real clients or pretenders. There are only guests who deserve respect from the moment they walk through these doors. Anyone who can't live by that simple rule has no future here." The lawyer unfolded the new policy document and pinned it to the front desk. In bold letters it read, "Zero tolerance for discrimination. Policy enforced by ownership." The crowd applauded again, a wave of sound that filled the high-ceilinged space. Even those watching from outside through the glass joined in, tapping the windows, cheering softly as if a wall that had stood for years had finally cracked. Mr. Carter let the noise settle, then delivered his final words, the kind that linger long after the lights dim. "Dignity isn't earned by your clothes, your color, or your bank account. It's yours the moment you walk in the room. And from now on, no one here will ever forget that." Phones caught the moment, the quiet gravity of truth cutting deeper than any headline ever could. Guests began shaking his hand, thanking him, not for buying cars, but for buying back humanity in a place that had sold it cheap. As the last camera panned out, capturing the new sign on the glass doors with his name beneath it, one phrase spread across social feeds, etched in the minds of millions watching live. He walked in as trash in their eyes. He walked out as the boss and changed the rules for everyone. And for once, power didn't shout. It didn't threaten. It simply stood tall and rewrote what justice looked like, one dealership at a time.